How every morning starts. Cup of coffee. And away we go. Hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so we're going to start mocking up the steering box. I've gone ahead and just set the column in the old bracket. Tried to get the depth in and out about correct. And I want the pitman arm directly over the top of the tie rod. And the reason I want that is because then geometry isn't trying to pull it at an angle. So basically it's going to set somewhere like that. So this is really friggin' tricky. I don't know that I can do it, but we'll give it 14 shots and see if I can make it happen without moving the box. And I believe I got 2 marks. And if I did it right, which I did not, because I don't have a mark up here. So, although that was in vain, round 1. Let's try it again. It's just really hard to hold this thing. It's awkward, obviously. And the bolt holes I need to get at, of course, are at the bottom. Well, that's interesting. I believe it's something like that. The best way to find out is to tack this in place and then see where we're at. Now I can move the column up and down. I can move it left and right. So I do have some leeway. There is a double D slider piece that goes in here and goes out to the steering box. So I can actually move the column up a little farther just to get the geometry a little better. So there's that. The way this steering column originally was, it was slanted toward the center of the car. God only knows why. But it was way up here, and then the shaft going down was 1.5 feet long. Can't do that with a Vega steering box. So we'll figure out what to do there. I can't do anything as far as a longer dropped pitman arm, because that's what they make. If I could get a 4-inch, I'd even be happier, because if I set her here like this, roughly, I'm above the spring just about excellent as far as left to right. You don't want it way up here. You don't want that angle of the drag link, if you will, to be at an angle. If it is, every time the suspension moves, of course, that's going to get longer or shorter as it goes up and down. And that's where Jeeps get their death wobble. They put lift kits on them and stuff and change the geometry, and then they hit a bump. The suspension goes up, which makes the shaft longer because it goes in an arc. Turns the steering wheel one way, it goes back down, turns it the other way, and then it starts to just wobbling uncontrollably. So that's a very dangerous situation. I don't know if you've ever driven a Jeep that has it, but it's scary. So we'll continue on with that. I also have a couple other things I want to talk about. We'll get to that in a minute. So I just figured out a little something that might help a little. We'll see here. And if I actually use this existing bolt hole and ditch these, by doing that, I gained just a hair more length to the front, which does not hurt me at all. But what it does do is gives me an existing hole and my other hole here. It moves the box forward about another inch, which makes my geometry to the steering column just that much better. Well, obviously I have to space this out, but my angle coming out will be less noticeable, and you can use it's got a U-joint instead of a rag joint, so I'd be okay there. So now here's the other fancy part about this whole ordeal. This plate, you can see that, goes on the outside of the frame. Now it goes on the outside of the frame to add support. The problem with that is I'm going to have to shim it out to get it square, but that way when you tighten the bolts it doesn't collapse the frame. And the reason I know this to be true is because these are threaded, all 3 holes. Now I could go ahead and drill those out and put nuts on the inside or run the bolts through, but either way it has to be through the frame. It's obviously much more structure, makes it stronger. There is a gusset inside here that holds that frame from collapsing, so every little bit helps. So I've basically determined that my plate is going to go here on the outside of the frame. I'm adding an inch on the inside because the box has actually got a curved part that sticks out a little bit, so I'm adding an inch there and a half an inch on the outside, which gives me a total measurement of 4.5 inches. So I'm going to put grade 8 bolts, and I also added enough that I can put a Nylox nut past the steering box as well, just as an added security so my steering box doesn't fall off. Just seemed like a good idea. Just another quick note, when I put they call it a double D piece in here to attach to the actual steering box, I've got plenty of room inside that, so I can get a little bit longer piece, so if I need to adjust the steering column up or down a little bit in order for me to be comfortable in this shortened up mutt, I can do that. I climbed in it today for the first time, which is really not the best of ideas to go this far and then say, oh, I wonder if I fit. It's not too bad. I measured my Camaro seats. I have a set of 2014 Camaro bucket seats, which hopefully will be comfortable on a 2,000 mile ride plus. And they don't seem too bad. It's a Speedway Motors box with the replacement spindles for the front of this, which is just about the same height. And I slid it to about the position. There's actually pretty good leg room in here. I will have to do a little something with the back. I haven't figured out. There's a place in there where I can actually move the back part of the floor back a little bit, and hopefully that'll take care of everything. So it shouldn't be too awful bad. Okay, so I got the box temporarily mounted, and as you can see, the Pitman arm is directly over top of the tie rod. That's exactly what we want. Then, height-wise, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but this is from the top of the connection to the right side wheel, and we're just about exactly the same height, which means that we won't get that death wobble that we worry so much about. Now there's a couple other little things that we have to deal with. Not a big deal, but as you can see, the frame tapers right here, so I will have to shim that out before I weld it. And same with the steering box. The roundness here causes it to be not square to the frame, so we will shim that out as well when we finally install it. But right there is a beautiful thing. It's right over top, so that just makes it so much easier. and makes the steering much safer, because this car is going to go fast. I'm hoping I can cruise at 70 plus 68 or 69 miles an hour, speed limit being 70, down the highway and not have to go 50. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but I made a pattern to cover this hole so that I can still use the actual factory venting. A lot of you guys might be asking, why aren't you just making an entire flat firewall? Well, I could, but this is not that car. This is a car that's gonna at least a little bit look like an old 60s style gasser, because that's what they did. They took cars from the 50s that were already getting old and mama didn't want to drive no more, and they were cutting them up into gassers. Well, they didn't take this whole firewall out and put a nice, flat, smooth, painted, Bondo, looks perfect firewall in it. They took the heavy stuff off, they made little patterns, and they pasted it all in there just to cover up the holes. That's what we're doing. There's a lot of things about this car that are not going to be to everybody's, oh my God, it's not a true hot roddy, as the new standards, Riddler Award car. And it's never going to be. That was not the intention. The intention is to make it a freak, which it already is. It's got 40 inches cut out of it. Make it a gasser, which I've done because I've got the straight axle in it. It's going to have a big motor, blah, blah, blah. Tilt front end, tunnel ram, 2.4s. It's going to have a flat firewall in it, but it is going to have air conditioning. It's going to be a driver, we hope. So that being said, I don't have time to make an entirely new floor pan, to make an entirely new firewall, to close off the vents up here, which this is actually a vent. The lever flips open from inside, air comes down through here, and actually you've got ventilation. So that's pretty cool in itself. So I'll just put a block off here to keep the heat and all out, and there we have it. So a lot of things aren't going to be up to the standards of the new class of $75,000, $100,000 hot rods. It never is going to be as long as I own this car. This is my toy. I'm doing what I can to make it right. I'm buying the new parts that I need to make it safe and dependable. I'm putting a new motor in it, a new clutch, all the goodies, a newer rear end, disc brakes, and I'm going to drive the pants off it. So if you want to comment and see I'm doing it wrong, that's fine. I'll tell you just what I think. Go somewhere else. I'm not sure that you can see this, but this part of the firewall is actually concave right here. The other side is flat. I don't see any signs of any damage on the frame or anything. I'm going to try and get in here and pop this out just a little bit. See if I can't get her a little more squared out. It's still really good tin. There's no signs of it ever being crunched, but who knows? They were pretty tough old burrs. Okay, so now you can kind of see how all of this is going to come together. Now this is going to go here, and this is going to go here right alongside it. Now I could do all this in one piece, but I'm not going to, because it's just easier to match up where everything goes. So there you have it. And that'll fill it in.